This is the Pentax HD 55 to 300 millimeter lens. It can get a little bit confusing because there's actually several 55 to 300 millimeter lenses from Pentax, and the way I remember them is just by ranking them with bestness. This is the second best one, with the best one being the PLM. It has kind of a newer style with a green ring, but not the older style with a green ring. That's the DAL lens. So I learned from last time, I'm only going to talk when the trail is flat and not full of gravel, except for this part. So this week on my rides, I brought my HD Pentax 55 to 300 telephoto lens. Now I'll admit, telephoto really, there's a deer. I'll admit, telephoto really intimidates me, and I think it's because it's just such a different type of photography that takes just a really different type of muscle than I've been exercising my whole life as a hobbyist photographer. So this is what I was waiting for. There's this clearing here on the trails, and the sun is coming in from the left, and deer kind of walk through this spot a lot. So here's a deer. Just started taking pictures of it. If you want to use the 55 to 300 on the long end, you have to shoot it at f8 to f13, kind of in that range, with f11 being maybe the best sharpness. Just in my own personal tests, I don't know if that is actually totally accurate, which actually makes it very usable when you have this kind of lighting situation. Otherwise, it can be pretty hard to keep the shutter speed up without putting the ISO at some ludicrous number. I'm going to try to take a few more pictures of this deer. They're not going to be good, but you'll have to accept them. Okay, so let's say hypothetically that you have a trip up to Yellowstone planned or something, some one-time, once-in-a-lifetime trip, and you need a telephoto lens and you have a budget or just like a size and weight requirement, then you're looking at just about the best option for your Pentax camera. Feels so cool. I'm just pretending to be a National Geographic photographer. Pretending this is Africa. And those are albino hippos. And really, then there's a neighborhood just across the side of that fence line. Focusing is okay. When it's light enough, I just have it on single point right now. And it's fast enough. I don't know. I feel like if I was tracking a bird in the sky or something, it might be frustrating. You just have to get tricky with your techniques. And I'm definitely not the person that has those kind of techniques. But for purposes like this, where I'm just locking it in and it's generally the same distance from me, and with minor adjustments, it's pretty quick. And then there's the subject matter. You could just shoot telephoto landscapes, and I suppose many people do, and there's definitely a place for that. But the reason why I'm more keen on telephoto is for things I can't normally reach, like birds or wildlife, which just takes a whole another skill set that I also don't have. Okay, so maybe this isn't a pro lens per se, but it does have some pros. For one, practically, it's just very compact. And then two, I'm starting to realize for the price, it really gets your feet wet into a different type of photography. Of course, you could use this lens for whatever you want, but it just itches to be used to capture wildlife. Wildlife photography in general, and then especially birding, which I'm trying to do right now, it occurs to me might be the most difficult type of photography. Maybe that's not true, but it has a lot of challenges. And one of them is outside of photography, you have to get very knowledgeable about what you're trying to shoot and kind of their habits and stuff, especially with birds. So I've been tracking this. I don't even know what it is because I haven't had a good glimpse of it yet. It just flies by me really fast and it makes this cool call. But I've been tracking this bird the last 2 weeks, every time I see it, and kind of remembering where I saw it and what time. And I don't know if you find like their nest or something. I really should do more research into this. But I'm just trying to figure out where they fly and how I could maybe park myself somewhere and just observe and maybe catch a glimpse of it. But that's what's so fun about this lens. Before, this was the type of photography that I never even bothered to try, but now I'm trying to learn about animals and their habits and behaviors. I'm trying to learn about where they live. Like I tracked down this place and this time as a time when they're gonna be coming in the area. But that's so incredibly thrilling. It's like a chase. You know, with like astrophotography and stuff, it's hard. You gotta research and do some things to make sure you get the shot. But at least you know the Milky Way is gonna be there. This is like a whole different level of photography. While I wait for this bird to make a second pass, let's talk about camera settings. In general, you're going to be following the same principles you would for any sort of wildlife or birding photography. You want the shutter speed really high, pretty much as high as possible. But of course, there's a sacrifice with that, and that's your ISO that you're bumping up. The thing that's particular about this lens is you really, in my opinion, shouldn't compromise on the f11. Now, of course, that's going to be a little bit subjective to anyone taking the picture and what they feel comfortable with. But for me, f11 was, if you're using it all the way zoomed out, which for wildlife or birding you're going to be tempted to do, then you really need to be at f11 or higher. I guess if you can, f13 was okay too. Probably higher than that is not good, but f11 was a good sweet spot. So because of that, you can see here in the daytime I'm pointing up at the sky and I'm getting 1600, 1000 at ISO 400 and f11. So it's a very usable lens. You just have to be when it's bright. And this is the morning, so it's not even totally bright yet, but there you go. Of course, I'm in burst mode, which depending on your camera can be decent or slow. I'm on single point autofocus, and a note about the autofocus, I just kind of would pre-focus at the distance I would assume I would be seeing the bird when it'd fly by. And then when it would come by, I could either focus once and it was very quick, or I could choose not to focus because I thought that was about the same distance. And honestly, in fast moving action like that, I think that strategy gives me better hits than attempting to autofocus on a fast moving subject, if that makes sense. But I'm definitely not the expert in that realm either. And there are articles and tutorials about how to get the best focusing out of your Pentax system. And it really is a lot of technique. You have to admit, and maybe you fall into this category too sometimes, that's a little bit easy to get thinking about certain specs and, it's not the sharpest lens, so I don't want it. Well, back to my example about once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. I kind of felt that way for a while, and I visited Yellowstone a couple times when I lived closer to it. And I was holding out for the best lens, so I just didn't have a telephoto lens. And there were loads of opportunities I missed where people next to me with just cheap 75 to 300 lenses were getting opportunities. And sure, maybe they weren't the absolute best they could get, but I was getting zero because I didn't have any telephoto lens. Not to say this lens is only just better than nothing. It's better than that for sure, and it has its place. Practice a little bit, like I said, to know its strengths and weaknesses, how to get the best out of it, and then you won't be frustrated when you're in Yellowstone trying to capture that once-in-a-lifetime picture of a bear or whatever. So in short, this makes a good budget telephoto option. If you understand its weaknesses, you can get around them and get some really nice results, especially for the money. And yeah, I wouldn't hesitate to pick it up, especially if you have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get some wildlife, or you're just excited about starting to exercise those muscles and get into it. Seems like a good option. Those are my thoughts on the 55 to 300 HD DA Pentax lens. Thanks for riding with me, and until next time, happy snapping.